Russia says its forces have repelled a new Ukrainian offensive in the western Kursk region. The attack comes 6 months after Ukraine's surprise cross-border assault, the biggest on Russian soil since World War II. Moscow claims Kyiv launched multiple waves of attacks using troops and armoured vehicles. Meanwhile, Ukraine has offered a humanitarian corridor for Russian civilians trapped in the seized border areas. Kyiv says over 1,500 civilians remain in these regions and accuses Russia of neglecting its own people. The Kremlin has yet to respond to the offer. We are joined for more on this by our reporter Aditya Wadwan. Aditya, what can you tell us about these recent updates from the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Well, Tom, if you see, Ukraine, as you rightly pointed out, there were about 1,500 people, Russian people, who are in the areas where the Ukraine army has occupied those areas. And, they have shown this moment of generosity, by allowing these people to cross over to Russia. While the Kremlin spokesperson hasn't so far, commented upon this, but this is a significant move as far as this Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Let us, on the other side, if you see, Russia isn't adhering to the, as far as the international laws are concerned, because, recently there were some reports that many Ukrainian soldiers who were in custody of the Russian forces, who had even surrendered themselves to the Russians. They were shot dead at the spot, So this is a very contrasting thing between the two sides that is coming to the fore, So it needs to be seen by when would this war be finally come to an end, because, so far what has happened, the United States, since the Trump administration has taken over the charge of the affairs,
Thank you very much, Aditya, for joining us. We are joined to discuss this further by Glenn Grant, ex-advisor, Defense Minister of Ukraine, joining us from Latvia, and Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, Director Communications of BCMF BRICS Culture Media Forum. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. My first question is to Glenn Grant. Ukraine's cross-border operations into Russian territory have intensified over the past 6 months. What is the strategic objective behind these incursions, and how does Kyiv justify them under international law? Glenn Grant.
Well, firstly, it doesn't have to justify them under international law at all, because Russia is the adversary and Russia attacked. So there is nothing to stop Ukraine fighting back. In fact, it's enshrined in the UN Charter that you can do so. The reason is quite simple. That on one side, Russia is pushing forward and making territorial gains, and Ukraine sees an opportunity to do the same inside Russia, which will pull troops away from the area where Russia is strongest. And that's already happened. And each time they do another counterattack, then it puts the Russian staff under more pressure to decide where they see their priorities.
Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, Moscow claims to have repelled at least 8 waves of Ukrainian attacks in the Kursk region. From Russia's perspective, what does this escalation signal about Ukraine's military strategy? And how does is Russia prepared for further incursions?
Well, thank you for your question. Namaskar. The main problem now in Ukraine is the lack of a legitimate, popularly elected president. It is obvious to all sensible people that a turning point has come at the front of Russian-Ukrainian front in favor of Russia. Mr. Zelensky's statement to form a humanitarian corridor in Kursk region is another attempt to attract public attention to Ukraine. His desire is very childish. In my opinion, there is only one way to overcome the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. It is necessary to officially announce the date of election for a new president and provide political freedom to all parties, including the leaders of those parties that speak Russian language. And in this case, at least we'll have some personality who can officially put signature to the peacemaking agreement. That is my opinion.
Glenn Grant, I wanted to come back to you in regards to the humanitarian corridor in the Kursk, with around 1,500 Russian civilians reportedly trapped in seized areas. Does Ukraine have the capacity and willingness to ensure their safety?
Yes, they do. The Ukrainian armed forces have got a civil military cooperation arm of the armed forces, which, when the Russians retreat, leaving people without food and without water, usually almost exclusively old people who are really in their last years, then the CIMIC organization, as it's called, goes around, finds them, feeds them, and in many cases tries to take them away from damaged houses and remove them to the Sumy area. The problem is that there are so many of them that this is beginning to exceed the numbers that they can manage. Hence the desire to actually to allow some of them to go back to Russia. That is if they want to go. But I'm not sure that all of them will wish to take that move, because they've been left behind and abandoned. So they're not exactly happy people.
Dr. Dvoryanov, why has Russia remained silent on this proposal, and does Russia see any obligation to assist these civilians?
The conflict with Ukraine is a conflict of civilization. Obviously, is a catastrophe. This conflict was very well organized and prepared last 20 years. And brainwash which was done with Ukrainian population finally take all of us when we have right now war between not only two neighbor nations, but between brother nations. Of course, our national leader, Vladimir Putin, he is take care about the civilians. That's why all our activity in front, we do all our steps very carefully. We always take care about all civilians, not only in the Russian side, also in Ukrainian side. It always confirmed that Russia take care about all population in Ukraine, both, because it's our brother nation. Again and again, I want to say this. And definitely, we should make something with a new elected president, and that is only one way to finish this humanitarian crisis in Ukraine.
Glenn Grant, I wanted to talk about these arrival of the French and Dutch fighter jets. How is this going to help Ukraine, and how will they be used moving forward?
Well, of course, how they're going to be used is very much up to the general staff and the commander of the Air Force. There are a lot of things that they could use them for, one of which is air-to-ground attack on the front line where Ukrainian forces are pushing forward heavily. The other one is to try and actually reduce the amount of attacks onto civilian forces. And I'm sorry, but the previous speaker is living in a fool's world if he thinks that Russia is taking care of the Ukrainians. The only way that Russia takes care of Ukrainian civilians is to kill them. So one of the things that they will use this aircraft for is to try and stop the bombing and stop the missiles coming across, which is causing such devastation in civilian areas, hospitals and schools.
Dr. Dvoryanov, we are running out of time, so I just want to let you very, very quickly respond to that. Okay. Sorry, continue.
Yes, what I want to say right for the new generation of new political leaders who can take responsibility for the future of their nation. Look, for example, right now I'm in Jagannath Puri. It's a very ancient city in the India, Bharatavarsha. That is the city of Lord Jagannath, who is himself Lord of all universe. And I try my level best to pray for peace and dedicate myself to the opportunity to make some real proper a peacemaking agreement between Ukraine and Russia. But it should be on the conditions which are not against humanity. That is most important right now. And I'm looking forward that new leader of Ukraine will appear very soon on political stage. And then we can start officially negotiate with peace. Because it should be not somebody from the show
Thank
business.
you very much,
not
Dr. Dvoryanov and Glenn Grant, for joining us on that discussion.